Hey everybody, today I'm making some index cards, but as a little twist, I will mount these to cardboard before I start creating them. I really love the feel of cardboard, especially when I make artist trading cards, and I thought an index card is not so much different, so I am going to use that cardboard as my base, and here I'm covering it completely with my Tombow glue stick, and I'm going to adhere the index cards to the cardboard. I plan to decorate the index cards or to color them with Brusho powders, which is quite a messy process, and it's also always very wet. So I thought that cardboard base might be perfect to hold the cards flat compared to the cards without the cardboard. I'm happy to get 3 of these cards to this piece of cardboard, so I'm going to create a trio of artists, or not of artist trading cards, of index cards today. And I will cover this piece completely with a layer of clear gesso. That will seal everything a little bit more, especially because I'm going on top with a lot of water later, so I would not do this without adding that layer of gesso. And the gesso that I'm using is from Liquitex, the clear gesso. It's one of my favorites. I also have the PPU, which is super similar, and I love the surface it gives you. It's quite gritty, and it's also perfect for all kinds of mediums. As this needs some drying time, I have already prepared another one which is already dry. Please excuse the rooster in the background. In summer, I usually have my window open, and the garden underneath has a lot of animals, and sometimes it's a little bit noisy, but I personally love that. I'm using a cutter to cut down the cardboard. I thought I would do this without a ruler, but then I recognized that it's a bit hard to stay straight, so I'm using that metal ruler just to keep everything straight. Now it's time to decorate the cards with some stamps, just to bring in a little bit more texture, and I'm using that simple background stamp. It's a script texture from our Mix It Up 6 stamp set, and I'm just placing it to my surface and I'm inking it up. I think it's the Rusty Brown from StazOn, and I just dip on the cards because I don't want to have the full image perfectly. I just want to have hints of that texture on my background. I don't add any other background images for now because I think it's enough. We have that grid texture of that index card and that script. And now I plan to add some texture with a stencil and some crackle paste. I found the crackle paste in my stash and I have it for quite a long time, and it's already a little bit dry, and I'm not sure if it will work as a crackle paste. I have to try it, but if the cracks do not appear, I don't mind that. I just use it as a usual texture paste then. And what I plan to do is I want to use our Sketchy Leaves number 4 stencil, and I want to create that image with the crackle paste. And I have a wet wipe in that tin of the crackle paste to avoid that it dries, but it still does. I think if you have crackle paste, you have to use it up quite quickly. This is a big pot, and it gets drier and drier the more you come to the top, and the stuff under at the bottom or at the middle of the pot is still quite okay. It's a bit difficult to apply everything without messing around, but it works out almost perfectly. I just think about buttering a bread. I think that's a good mindset for adding texture paste through a stencil, and I always go just in one direction, and that depends on the stencil. I try to not go against details, and here I have a little bit of a mess on this, and I'm getting rid of it with my finger. Our stencils are always limited in stock, so usually I do not reorder them. I did this only once with our Sketchy Leaves #1 stencil because it was so popular, but usually once they are gone, they are gone. So in case you like them, you have to get them quickly. And we usually then create a similar design if a stencil sold out. That is not the same, but with the same style, I would say. So yeah. Once I have applied the texture paste, I set this aside and let it dry overnight. I think if you're working with crackle paste, you have to let this dry on its own and not using a heat tool to get those cracks. So I just let this sit until the next day. And now it's time to work with the Brusho powders. Brushos are water-soluble pigments, and especially the Brushos have different color pigments in one color, so that makes them quite interesting. And I really love using them for backgrounds, for cards, for mixed media, and all that kind of stuff, and also to color in stamped images from time to time. I will give you the names of the colors I'm using here in the video description, because you know that I'm not able to read it when I do the voiceover because my screen is so small. By the way, the crackling hasn't worked that good. You can see the cracks, but they don't they are not apart from each other, so it's very hard to make them visible. I'm not sure if a patina color would have gone into the cracks. I will try this next time when I use it. I just wet the card very much, then I sprinkle on top the Brushos and let this sit and work on its own, because usually then you get the most interesting backgrounds. At the moment it looks like if I'm covering up the stenciled image, but this is with that paste, and the card itself is with the clear gesso. And once it dries, the paste will come through and the Brusho will dull down on the texture paste. So the botanical image will be visible once everything is dry. If you don't have brushes, you can use other water-soluble pigments for a similar look. For example, the Lindy's Magicals, or from Nuvo, the shimmer powders. If you don't have any of these, you can create something similar just with watercolors. To get some interesting texture with watercolors, you can also use wet watercolor pencil and some sandpaper and rub something of that pigment from the pencil into the wet background, into your wet watercolor background. That will also give you some really nice pigment sprinkles like you get them here with the Brushos. And now the only thing you have to do is wait until everything is dry. Sometimes I'm coming in with a kitchen roll and just soaking up some of the paint if it's too much, if there is a puddle, or I'm going in with a brush to move things around. Once these cards are dry, I'm coming back in with that stencil. You can see that the botanical image is very visible, but I wanted it to be a bit more white. And I thought I'm going on top with a little bit of heavy gesso, and I'm using that sponge tool to apply it through the stencil. Brushes are staining and bleeding, so that means you can cover this completely with gesso and the brushes will always bleed through, and they will also bleed through the gesso I'm applying here, but it gets a little bit lighter and more white, and that I think brings in a bit more contrast and power to the card. I will now add some white splatters for some highlights to the cards, and I'm using that Viaco Art Graph in white, but you can use any other white color, white acrylic ink, or white paint, just thinned down a little bit. I decided also to go with some gold splatters. I'm using the gold Liquitex ink here, and I can tell you, if you have these metallic inks, use them because they also get dry in the bottle. So it's something you don't want to store forever. Just get it onto your projects. For the sentiment, I'm stamping our Mix a Sentiment stamp set to a piece of that gritty design paper. It's quite an old one I have from Die Cuts with a View, and I'm stamping every image from our Mix a Sentiment stamp set to this paper, and later I'm going to cut out the words I want to use on my card, and of course these words can all be used for future projects. I cut some of the words out and I'm adhering them to the cards with my glue stick. And of course there is a blog post again over on our shop blog. It's linked in the video description so you can have a look at the close-up images, and you will also find all the details about this project. Yes, and that was the video for today. I hope you enjoyed this and you are inspired, and I hope we will see us next time. I wish you a wonderful rest of the week. Bye!